Hi, I'm Bruce Clay. This is our executive overview to SEO. It serves to give executives the fundamental parts of SEO that an SEO team would normally do. It is extracted from a 15-hour SEO course, boiled down to approximately 1 hour, that give you a good feel for how SEO works. The complexities and the pieces and the things that go into it and why it doesn't work that well and why it works great based upon certain kinds of things that are tied to your website. Your website, of course, being fundamental to SEO. I hope you enjoy this brief overview. Let me know if you have anything. I'll be summing it up at the end. There are multiple definitions for what search engine optimization is responsible for. I just said it was all about traffic. Well, one example is that it's about traffic. And you could reword it any number of other ways. But come the end of the day, it's about traffic. So what we want to do is understand that that is the purpose. We don't want to have people say, well, I want to see what my return is on SEO. The job of SEO is to give you traffic to your website. The return is the job of the website. The return is the job of your sales team. The return is the job of your business. But we contribute to it by providing the traffic that can be ultimately converted. Now, the pieces that go into doing search engine optimization are varied. One is the technical on-page improvements that you can make. And that is everything from tags to content. You have keywords. You have the ability to generate a mechanically sound website. That's very, very important. You also have to worry about how are you going to get links. Links are a vote that your site is authoritative, that it is an expert piece of content, and that other people would refer to it. So what we need to be able to do is have SEO understand that it not only is going to be a technical job, it is going to be a content job. It is going to be a targeting job. We need to understand personas and all the things that go with being able to do that. Plus, we have to have a piece of content on your site, many pieces ideally, that other people want to refer to help identify you as a subject matter expert. Now, of late, SEO has been expanding, and now it includes things like speed, and you've probably heard the phrase schema, and featured snippets and answer boxes, and now we have local and mobile and voice search and artificial intelligence. All of that comes together to help SEO work. And if you can add it together, of course, you're going to end up with traffic, because you should end up with ranking. But if you don't do those things, well, you're only doing part of the process, and don't be surprised if you don't get those results for the work you didn't do. Search engine optimization may not make sense to a lot of people. They may not understand, why do I have to do this? Or you did that doesn't make sense. Or worse yet, a spammer is doing that, and that's out of bounds. A lot of people don't understand SEO. What we're going to do is we're going to teach you in this course what SEO is about, and we're going to help you understand it. One of the things we constantly run into is people come to us, and some of the time they say, well, we've done SEO, therefore SEO is done, right? You just have a little bit of maintenance. SEO isn't done. You have 30,000 competitors a day, 8 algorithm changes a day, and an entirely set of new algorithm variables constantly being added. It's not done. It'll never be done. So now the question is, which way do I want to go? Do I want to save some money and go the cheap route and probably get a novice that doesn't know the answer? Or do I want to always get the right answer first time? This is a competitive sport. You cannot afford to intentionally be last. I don't think anybody can. So in this particular case, I would always opt for the good advice. So where does your traffic come from? Well, according to Google, a vast majority of your traffic actually comes from organic search results. Approximately 7 out of 8 clicks are going to be coming from organic results. That's why the click-through rate versus impression rate on paid ads is quite low. It doesn't actually give the meat as well as some of the organic results. However, even then, what we were used to for many, many years is that the head terms, which are your one-word or two-word phrases, they would generate a lot of traffic. And that traffic, we had figured out how to convert and really how to attract that traffic. And now, with some of the artificial intelligence, the head terms are not designed for transactional sites. They're more informative. Like, what is search engine optimization? Not who do I hire? And those changes really impact quite a bit. Now, additionally, Google has indicated other results, like 70% of the queries have no prior matches. Maybe that's it's a specific way of wording it. If you look at a website, many of the queries that people put in, they put in two words, they didn't see what they wanted, they added words to the end of the phrase. When you do that, nobody has actually got that string on their website. So 70% of the searches, you're not going to find an exact match within the content of the site. And if you're not going to find that, this is an opportunity for us to try to figure out how do people search and string together their queries, and how can we put the content on our site in that order. Even if it's not a string, we can put our words in an order, and we can attract the visitors right out of Google. Plus, we also know that 54, or a lot, let's just say that, of the queries are more than 3 words. That's 4-word phrases, 5-word phrases, 6-word phrases. People have learned that if they're too vague, they have to do a new search anyhow. So experienced searchers have a tendency to search for longer and longer and longer phrases. So we just have to understand the long-term query is well over 50% of all searches. It'll vary by industry. That's the vagary here. But 50% or more of all searches are 4 or more words. That tells us that we shouldn't be really that concerned about 1 and 2 word phrases. I really quickly want to discuss click-through rates. We know that position 1 gets more clicks than any other position. That's great. That's actually the way it should work. It drops off for position 2. Very much like once you find your car keys, you don't keep searching for them. However, one of the interesting phenomenon is that position 4 in the Google search results on a mobile device, because of the swiping method, position 4 actually gets more clicks than position 3. Now clearly you want to be in position 1 or 2. That works out great. If you have a lot of mobile searches, it's going to impact where and what your click-through rate is by position. But just understand, this is the first page. It drops off so much that you don't really want to consider the second page. Quite frankly, if you had to keep going to find your website and you're on page 3, you're the only one there. So, we all have learned 90-some% of all clicks are page 1. The rest, they're on a hunt. So don't go to page 2. You have to be at the top half of page 1. Earlier I mentioned 0 clicks. 0 click occurs when somebody does a search, they see the results that Google presents, and then they don't click on one of those results. And it turns out that the no-click rate on a mobile device is almost twice, not quite, but almost twice a desktop. So even though desktop searches may occur less frequently than a mobile search, and in many cases it's 50-50, even though it would occur less, you actually get a higher click-through rate. That means the desktop is still very, very powerful. An example of a 0 click would be an answer box. How many movies was this person in? 23. Thank you. I don't have to click. Those kinds of queries, it's solved. Answer boxes are great for that. If you don't have to go through to a web page and you're on a mobile phone, you win. Directions, you win. But many times, you're not searching for that. You have a how-to or something like that. That's where you're going to get your clicks. One of the things I like to say is that SEO is forever. It turns out that SEO is really not done, ever, because Google changes the algorithm approximately 8 times a day. You've got 30,000 competitors changing every day. So SEO is really done only when Google stops changing things and all of your competition has died. I'm going to be talking about what it takes to kind of get to the top of the rankings. And part of it is how are we going to relate our site to the website. In the first slide here, we're talking about something that we refer to as being least imperfect. Least imperfect has to do with how we deal with an algorithm. So the algorithm is claimed to have 200 to 300 variables in it. Bing has actually claimed they have over 500. We can sit here and imagine what all of them are. The thing is, we don't know for sure. There's just a lot of variables in the algorithm. We don't even need to know what all of them are because there's no way for us to determine what the weighted averages are. There's no way for us to determine what the filters are going to do to them. And there are as many algorithms as there are keywords. So given that, what we have to actually do is understand what are we going to do to our website to actually cause ranking. What are the rules of the game? How do we play this game? How are we competing? Now, when you think about the word competing, what you really have to understand is this algorithm isn't what we're competing against. You can't imagine what perfect is. Perfect is this thing, but it varies by keyword. So you can't really envision perfect. How do I have a perfect page is not anything that is being discussed in social SEO circles. It isn't that. What we have to do is understand what it takes to outcompete our competition. Now, that's going to vary. It's going to vary based upon natural behavior. It's going to be based upon what's in the index. In fact, it appears as if what Google does is it looks on, for a keyword, what's in the index and determines what's a natural behavior. And then the most natural behavior relative to the algorithm and the filtering and the user interface, that behavior actually changes on a keyword by keyword basis. So instead of saying we want to be perfect relative to the algorithm, that's where we go back to the story of our friend. The two guys that are cooking a meal. They go camping every year. They set up their tents. They're cooking a meal. Along comes a bear. They go running down the path, being chased by the bear. The person in front does not need to be an Olympic runner. They don't need to be a perfect runner. They only need to be faster than their friend, because their friend is the one that's going to get eaten by the bear. So in SEO, we are trying to outcompete the person or company that is ranked number one. If they're ranked number one and we want to pass them, we just have to be better than them. We don't have to be perfect when we take the algorithm. So what we're going to do in this section is we're going to describe what we might be able to do and how to look at how the variables can be measured relative to our competition and how we can actually pass them. And that's our goal. Now, the way we normally represent this is as a standard distribution graph. It's a bell curve. And in a bell curve, at the low end, you have people who aren't really optimized for a keyword. Then you have the people who are, and they're the natural population. Then you have the people who perhaps over-optimize. For instance, if I was after the word comedians, it could be that there's a blog out there that says the school board is a bunch of comedians. Hardly optimized for the word comedians. Whereas a comedy club might be very optimized for the word comedians. And what we have to do is we have to understand that. That's a dynamic in the intent and how focused we are in ranking for that particular keyword. In a normal population, which is what we are dealing with on the web, for a particular word, what is the distribution? And you can find that a majority of the population behave in a consistent manner. That's within the standard distribution. In this particular case, we're talking about an area that Google likes. They think they're the most natural. They fit the algorithm the best. They appear to be the kinds of things people will visit and dwell on. That is the top of the curve. And that is actually, in our world, we consider that to be the first page of Google search results. They're the most ideal population. They're the ideal situation. So what we want to do is, if that top of the curve, the first page of Google search results, is as close as you can come to what the algorithm says the user wants, because the algorithm fit it, the filters fit it, everything looks good. If that's what the users should be getting from the search engine, that is what we have to beat when it becomes least imperfect time. And that's really the course that we're going to be talking about, is how do we become least imperfect. Now I'm going to talk about how to clarify through words the intent. We know that the geographic zone might have a bias, but it's also the words you put on the page. So if I have an information page and it's got all this wonderful content about information, and then on the page I say shopping cart, free shipping, buy now, that's a mixed signal. And Google has openly said that e-commerce sites that have at the bottom of the page a whole lot of information content, things that are descriptive not of the product but of the topic, those are actually confusing to Google. And that you should focus instead on the product with the information, not on the subject of that particular product. It could be shoes, but a particular style and brand of shoes. You don't just write about shoes. You write about that style and brand, and very specifically about that style and brand. But if you write about shoes in general, you distract the search engines. You're giving information content mixed with e-commerce content. That confusion is going to cause a problem. So you have to be very careful about what you do on a web page. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about proximity. To clarify the meaning of a word, you need to have the words near each other. In other words, if I had an example of my apple is a lemon in paragraph 1, we're not sure if we're actually talking about fruit or a computer. If paragraph 6 is the first place I say computer, that's a weak signal. They're pretty far apart. What we're dealing with is if I say my Apple computer is a lemon, it clarifies the meaning of the word apple. And that is one of the things we want to be able to do. Latent semantic indexing is a nice, long, complex vector analysis kind of a formula that determines how strong the bond is between words throughout a piece of content. It predates computers by forever. So that strength of the words is very, very important. We also have to understand that what we want to do is not just have the words together in one spot, but we actually have to disperse and use the words throughout the content. Or the page is not about the content. That one paragraph might be about that content. So we're going to have to spread it throughout the page. That gives us an opportunity to add variety. And variety is what form of the word? Are we saying smile, smiling, smiled? Yes, that's what we can do. And Google understands that they're the same concept. So we have the variety, we have distribution and where the words are on the page, and we have proximity that's going to matter. It also matters the sequence. Is it Houston Apartments or Apartments Houston? And it has to be a more natural presentation. So a lot of that stuff is all going to come to play, and it's all going to matter when you're trying to get your page ranked. So I'm going to talk about theming. Now, theming is a pretty straightforward concept. If I use a word in one paragraph, it's hard to say that's the theme of the site. It's in one paragraph. That's not going to establish my whole website's about this word. If I use it throughout the page, I can see how it becomes the topic of a page, but it's still not what am I about. It's what the page is about now. I can give that credit, but it doesn't define what my site is about. Whereas if I have multiple discrete interconnected web pages, if I have page A and page B and page C all on the same kind of topic, right? I'm on SEO and I'm talking about keywords and tags and different things, content. If I have them all under SEO and they're all connected to each other appropriately, then that group of pages all about SEO establishes that section of my website as being themed. In order to establish a theme, it has to be multiple pages, and they have to have the same root words. And that is where you get to be a theme. If it's one page, one paragraph, one word, don't expect to rank very well for it. Now think back on what you would expect. If I wanted to find something about a hammer, if I had a page that mentions it in one paragraph, or I had a site that talked about 20 different types of hammer, it's pretty clear the site with 20 types of hammer is a better answer. We have to realize Google knows that. So depth of content, breadth of content, relatedness of the content, all of that comes together to help us understand that that is what the site is about. Now, Google has for a very long time provided us with Webmaster Guidelines. The Webmaster Guidelines specifically call out certain things that are expected. And, it really does repeat and has repeated for many, many, many years that you should have a clear hierarchy, that you should use text links, that you should specifically not have too many links, that you should point only to the important parts of your site, things like that. When we go through the Google Webmaster Guidelines, we circle essentially the things that are important. And that really does tell us to a certain extent what Google cares about. And when we do that, we identify that we have a clear hierarchy. It identifies that links go to the important parts of the site. Well, an important part is probably what people are searching for, which makes sense. We don't overdo the number of links. And we always use the keywords that would match the query. Well, that makes total sense. So what we want to be able to do is have it really be clear. Now, to paraphrase what Google really is asking for, I created a paragraph, and it says, make a site with a clear hierarchy, aligned by words the users would type, and with pages containing a reasonable number of text links that point to the important parts of your site. That is simply put what siloing does. We match what Google has for 10 years or longer been telling us to do on a website. And usually what happens is when we implement this, the rankings of that site, the organic rankings, shoot up. We just have to align the content sufficient for us to be a subject matter expert. Now I'm going to speak just briefly about query intent. The intent of the query is reasonably specific. Are you an e-commerce site, transactional, or are you informational? And in the middle is navigational. And the words you use on the site help the search engine understand what you're talking about. The words could be shopping cart and free shipping, or it could be tips, advice, and help. And those words really help express an intent. So when we think back on RankBrain, as I explained earlier, RankBrain determines the probable intent of the query because of the sites that are getting clicked on. And Google can look at the sites, determine the words the site uses, and determine if that probable intent is transactional or informational. So based upon that, query intent is critical because you need to match the intent being identified by RankBrain with the words that are on your web page. The next component is actually how something gets into the Google search index, any search engine index. Now, let's recognize that the index is their property. It belongs to the search engine, but that the information that is placed into their index is public trust information. This is my website in their index. Now, with that comes a certain burden on the search engines. They can come, they can sample, they can provide information. I benefit by getting traffic, and they benefit by having something to attract them to the website so that people can click on their ads. Very, very symbiotic. These pieces depend upon each other for the revenue I get and the revenue that the search engine gets. The way they do it is they actually fetch the page. Now, fetching the page is a complex process. In some cases, they're going to read the HTML and then they're going to chase down there's an image tag. That means I have to go get an image, or this is an included file. I have to go get that file. But Google also owns Chrome, and Chrome has a version called a headless browser. So Google can actually emulate a browser without rendering it on a screen. They can just build what would be presented on the screen. It's called a document object model. It is a rendering pre-processing, if you will, of what would be on a screen. So Google actually has already executed the JavaScript and the AJAX, and they've already determined that they're fetching an image X dimensions, and they have to return that much space. And therefore this text is down on page 2 of the screen. You have to scroll to get to it. And they can set all sorts of information about that particular screen. Now the DOM, the document object model, is then able to be passed through the spam checker, which is a miniature operating system. And the spam checker runs its rules. White text on a white background is bad, that kind of stuff. They validate all the spam rules. Now, assuming you pass, it's written to multiple databases. Information is written to multiple databases. Part of it is the main index. We believe it has over 300 elements. It goes into the cloud. This is referred to as the caffeine index. It's cloud-based, super fast. From the time you're spidered until you're there is under 2 minutes, close to 1 minute often. So it's a process, it's spidered, it's analyzed, it passes the spam filter, it's in the index. The different part of that is the cache. A cache is a rendering of your web page. Now, that rendering of the web page is of all the elements spidered, and that is maintained in a searchable area as well. It's just not in the cloud. So it doesn't necessarily sync up well with what's in the index and what's in the cache because of replication of content across multiple servers and different things that go on. A third area is multiple databases in the area of links, one of them being a PageRank database, one of them being just an index of all of the pages on your website used as a schedule. And that schedule is used to determine what is going to be spidered next. Now, the way the schedule works is not every page on every site is going to be spidered every day. There's trillions of pages. What Google has to determine is when a page is logically requiring a respidering effort. So your home page might get spidered every day, but some of your subpages might not be spidered every month because Google is just not going to spider trillions of pages every day. So there is actually a schedule based upon frequency of change. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But based upon it is time for this page to be spidered, that is a crawl. It would go from your home page to a subpage. And that crawling process keeps giving Google a list of sites on your domain that are due to be crawled and spidered and put in the index today. And that process is iterative across every domain on the website. That's how the index gets built. Now, different from that is how do we actually do a query? The query is where a user types in whatever their multiple keyword query is. It could be a question, it could be just a phrase, it could be just a word. That query then is going through a pre-processing algorithm because it may be dependent upon time of day or where you're located or language or prior search history. That information will bias the query. That biased query goes through, it is searched, then in the index, results are formatted, it comes back, then there's a presentation algorithm that says, I've got to include pay-per-click and I have a couple of images to add and these are the top 10. Let's format up our search result page, and that is then presented back to the query point, the searcher. So, and think about it, that whole process can be done in a half second. That's a remarkably fast exercise. You've got to give a lot of credit to the search engines. Now what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about spidering sequences and scheduling. So on the initial day, you create a brand new page. Google's going to spider it. They're going to put it in the index. It exists. It's there. The index matches what is on your server. A couple of days later, Google's going to come back and respider that page. Now, if you have 304s enabled on your server is going to say, sorry, hasn't been changed since you were here last. Otherwise, Google has to burn your crawl budget, fetch the page, and then determine that it matches the index. That's not a good user experience. You didn't change anything. At least it's not a good spider experience. So what Google's going to do is come back in a couple days, and it's going to be the same. Then Google's going to come back in a few more days. So instead of 2 days, it might be 5 days. And it's still the same. And then it's 7 days, and 14 days, and 28 days, and up to 3 months. See, if you're not changing the content, Google does not need to spider you as frequently. Now, on every website, you're likely to run into things that are hardly ever changed and things that are brand new. For instance, in a blog, you may do brand new blog posts, but you didn't change the one you did 2 weeks ago. So there's pages that don't change and pages that are new. You may also find that your homepage changes every day, especially if you're doing daily blog posts. So somewhere in here, we have a schedule built. And if your page is seldom changed, it might not be spidered for every 3 months. If it's changed every day, it might be spidered every 20 minutes. You don't really know. But the frequency of spidering is based upon the frequency and rate of change of that content. So if you change the content frequently, it'll be spidered more often. I want to make sure you understand. Being spidered more often does not cause you to rank better. It just causes whatever is going to cause you to rank to be in the index. But it's really based upon the index. Whatever's there is what's going to determine your ranking. It could be garbage in, garbage out. I could have a great page yesterday, change something, and then I lose all my rankings because I take out keywords or replace them in an alternate way. So a big part of this spidering schedule is we have got to get into the index. And that's what that is all about, getting into the index. If you're not in the index, give up on ranking because you can only rank if you're in the index. Now I'm going to discuss a little bit about what the index is. For probably a dozen years or more, Google indicated there were 128 variables in the algorithm. And I mean, every year they would say basically the same thing. Then all of a sudden, Google started enhancing the search result page. Suddenly, videos could be on the search result page, and it wasn't just 10 blue links anymore. And when that happened, Google announced that they had 200 variables in the algorithm. Sort of coincided like within 2 days of each other. So there's more variables in the algorithm, and there's more variables that they're actually spidering and putting in the Google search result page. Subsequent to that, I've heard Google people talk about there's 300 or more variables in the Google algorithm right now. Now the problem is that's variables. Those are buckets in a data record that say this is how many of these you have on your web page, and it's one per page, and you have all these data elements. But it never says that this is more important than that. All it says is here's your number, and they're just data elements in an index. So however many there are, think about this. If I have 300 variables, chances are not too many of them are worth more than 1 or 2%. You can't have 300 variables at 10% each. So you really have a lot of distribution of the things that contribute to your ranking. And what we have to be able to do is understand how that works. Now, the problem we face is that intent, what we get out of RankBrain for the intent, and what we get now out of our spiders, is that they understand that this particular keyword has an intent of shopping, or this keyword has an intent of transactional. If it's shopping, that keyword can change the importance, the weighted average that is used in the algorithm. So the data element in the index that's pulled out, this element became 5 times more impressive in the overall scheme of things because the title is more important if you're a shopping site. However, if you're an informational site, maybe the body is more important, or maybe just the H1s are more important. However you look at it, you have 300 variables, and each keyword has a slightly different intent, shades of gray, and that intent actually controls the weighted average in the algorithm. So you actually have as many algorithms as you have keywords. In other words, an infinite number of algorithms. So the algorithm that is used for search engine optimization may be a different algorithm than search engine optimization agency. The algorithm will change based upon the intent of the keyword. And that entirely changes how we're going to approach trying to reverse engineer an algorithm, because there are as many algorithms as there are keywords. Our approach is never to try to beat the algorithm. Our approach is always to beat the competition. Find out what they're doing right and do it better. And we're going to be talking about that soon. PageRank, I want to discuss because I think it's important to understand how it works, because it was the cornerstone of a lot of the Google algorithm, and we want to make sure that the algorithm, that we understand the algorithm for linking is greatly influenced by PageRank. And I want you to understand how PageRank plays in that algorithm and how it might bias our Google search results. The actual formula for PageRank is rather complex. Now, I've taken out all of the fancy integer signs and set symbols, but essentially the PageRank formula is a point system. It is not a number from 0 to 10. That's a representation of your PageRank. The number of points that you actually have in PageRank could be millions of points. And I'll explain the relationship between millions of points and a number from 1 to 10 in a second. But the formula says every page on the internet has a value. Now, the number of points given to a brand new page is equal to the 1 minus D portion of the formula, where D is a decay factor of 0.85. So when a page starts, it has 1 minus 0.85, or it has 0.15 points, which is a very small number. We add to it 85% of all the points passed to you by people linking to you. In other words, if somebody links to you, you get points associated with that link. And those points are actually accumulated as the number of points of the linking page divided by the number of links on that page. So if I had 100 points and I had 100 links, each link would get 1 point. Of that 1 point, I get to keep 85% of it. Now I have to add it together for every single website, every single link I have. So every one of those links are passing me points. So I have a lot of points that I am accumulating on my page, and those points get to be tallied up. I also have the ability to pass links within my own website. My homepage links to my subpages. Those also pass points. So I'm able to influence the ranking of my own pages by linking to them. And if I don't link to that page, it doesn't get any points. So the way I handle my internal linking passes points, and the way other websites on the internet link to me, that passes points. Now the number of points they pass, as I mentioned, is the number of points of the page divided by the number of links on that page. And some of those links would be internal to that website as well, navigation for instance. So you have to know the total number of links on the page, you have to have an idea about how many points that page has, and that would be able to tell you something about how many points you are receiving from that link. Now the problem is, nobody knows how many points a page has. You can figure out how many links there are. But if you don't know how many points the page has, it's very, very difficult to actually get in and try to manage your PageRank. What you want is links from very popular pages that themselves have a lot of links, that are considered authoritative, expert level sites. That is the kind of points that you're going to want to keep. That's one of the things that's going to happen in the internet in general, and you want to be a player in that. Now, the way the green bar works, it was a little bit different. And everybody got really concerned about, oh my goodness, my PR value, which is the green bar, dropped. And that actually caused a lot of confusion in the industry. The way it worked is that Google would take the largest site on the internet and figure out what number to the 10th power was that site, essentially building an exponential curve. So if the largest number of points was 5 to the 10th, Google could figure out what 5 to the first, 5 squared, 5 cubed, etc. was. And they knew how many points that entire exponential curve had at each level. So if I had 4,000 points, by looking at the curve, you can determine that 4,000 points is between the 3 and the 15,000 point range. So I would end up with a 5 to the 5th. That means I'm in that interval between the 3 and the 15,000 points. So my 4,000 points would give me a 5 as the exponent, and then that 5 is what was on the green bar. The green bar was a representation of the exponential curve, so a 5 meant I had a PR of 5. Now, the problem that we kept running into is that the curve was based on the largest site on the internet. And as that site got bigger, the curve changed. So sites like Amazon and CNN and Google itself and all the sites that were a PR 10, all those sites got bigger faster than perhaps my SEO site. So I would have been a PR 5 with 4,000 points. If I had worked and gone to 5,000 points, that's 25% better. On the current scale, you might not see a change. But if the larger site got larger faster, what you might find is that the 5,000 points, even though I did a great job and got an extra 1,000 points, that 5,000 points now might actually be a PR 4. And that created confusion in the industry. And a lot of managers said, what are you doing? You're losing PR for us. Your project isn't working. You're not helping us. You're not doing this. The problem we face is that PageRank is our relative importance on the internet compared to sites that I shouldn't be compared to. So as they get bigger faster, I actually will always see my PR drop. After a while, Google stopped allowing people to see the PR number. It was being used to sell links. It was being used as justification for effort. Oh, you're a PR 8, so I'm going to go get a link from you. Or I am a PR 7, I'm going to sell you this link at a high price. Well, that doesn't help Google. Buying links is not what Google wants. So Google withdrew the PR from the entire PageRank exposure, if you will. Now, that doesn't explain how this helps you. So what I'm going to do is give an example of something that actually is behind the scenes, always has been behind the scenes, and is used to be able to tally up PageRank. When somebody links to you, Google captures those PR points. But they also understand the anchor text, the clickable portion of that link. And what they do is they tally the points associated with the words in the link. So if you link to me with Bruce Clay, I get points for Bruce Clay. If you link to me with SEO, I get points for SEO. Those are separate buckets. And we don't get to see how many points are in each bucket. And we don't actually get to see what the anchor text is that is linking to us. So we don't have any visibility to that. But Google knows it. And what Google's going to do is they're going to look at a query and say the query is for SEO. They're going to go to all the sites that are appropriate by algorithm for SEO, and part of the algorithm is going to be how many SEO points do you have? I could have a lot of Bruce Clay points. That won't help me. The only thing that's going to help me is how many points I have that matches the query. And that is where the algorithm gets a benefit from PageRank. Now, there's a lot of other factors that have been now bled into it, and PageRank has probably morphed extensively over the years. For instance, is it an organic link or an inorganic link? Is it beneficial, not beneficial at a sentiment level? Are they saying good things about you or bad things about you? Is it in the header of the page, body of the page, or footer of the page that links to you? All of those factors are able to weight the value of that particular link. Google has patents on these things. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that if we're getting a link, it has positive sentiment, it's an organic site, and it is actually capable of helping us. It's a valid link. It is a legitimate contributor to our web page itself. It can generate traffic for us, and it's from an expert, authoritative site. That should be our goal. It is entirely possible in this case that I could have a competitor that has fewer links than I do, but they have more links with an appropriate keyword for the query. So in theory, I can come up with a keyword that nobody uses. I can get one link to myself and I can rank number one because nobody else has any. So that could be one of the things you might want to consider, and why long tail keywords are so much easier to rank, because links to you with that long tail keyword, now you don't have as many competitors. Head terms, very much harder. Now I'm going to discuss a little bit about the purpose of search engine spiders. In the beginning, the job of a spider was to fetch your HTML and then parse it. And there were a lot of tags and there was a lot of complexity in parsing it. Then, of course, the search engines wrote libraries and routines, and they had a standardization for how things were going to be parsed. The original Google Spider, Googlebot, was written to W3C, World Wide Web Consortium, specifications. And according to Google, they're still meeting those specifications. However, there's a lot more elements now available on a page that weren't really there when the specifications were written. And those elements, some of which are invented by search engines, such as nofollow, sponsored, things like that, attributes on images, the canonical tag, and perhaps some other image format like WebP. Now, all of those kinds of things are extensions to what HTML normally would do. However, the search engine spider, its role in life is to receive the information from your web page, parse it, understand it, fetch any missing information, assemble what would be your page, and then determine whether or not it is violating any Google rules, and then place it into an index. Now remember, the spider does not determine if you're worthy of ranking, because there's trillions of keywords that could not possibly be data in the index. What the index does is it describes the content of your page. So the job of the spider is to fetch your page and put it into the index. This is a very, very big thing. Now, if you're using a headless browser, which I believe is built into the spidering process, at least every other time or so, it is going to be able to actually run down your JavaScript. It is going to parse it. It is going to understand it. It is going to do CSS files. It's going to do AJAX. It's going to do everything to format the document object model for your particular page. And once that is built, then the spider can run through the rest of the process. The spam checking process is pretty complex. We'll talk about that later. But once it makes it past the step of you're disqualified, once it's okay, then it actually populates the data elements and puts it into the index. That's what it can do. Now you can block the spider with robots.txt. You might be able to do some dynamic loading that may cause it to not occur. You might be able to do some personalization based upon cookies, because search engines don't use cookies. They don't support personalization. You have other functions that the spider does. As I mentioned before, it'll actually take and populate the link database so that subsequent pages can be crawled. It keeps a cached copy of your page so that for some specific searches, such as searches that use quotes, it can actually find the exact match of that string, which may not be possible in the index. So we're going to have to make sure that works. Frames and frame sets, if you will, could eliminate content from the page. That is very common when you're running advertisements, so you don't want the advertisement to bias the content of the page. There may also be areas of the page you just don't want to include. For instance, in insurance companies, it's common to have the same disclaimer on every page of your site. You don't want to just look like duplicate content for a large block of text. So there's reasons to do certain things, and the spider is going to go through the process of making sure that what needs to be done is done. One of the things that is also true, and this has been true for a while, is you need to understand that what the spider is doing is they're spidering your page as if it was a mobile device. I've got more on this later, but if you consider the desktop versus the mobile format, and you find for speed or some other reason on a mobile format you don't load all the same content, what's happening is Google spiders you like a mobile device. Google never sees that content. That content won't be in the index, and it won't influence your ranking. So understand, you need one version of your web page. You just have to have it be capable of being rendered properly on a mobile device as well as a desktop. Now, when you write your content, what we're going to care about is it expert? Remember, we were talking earlier about EAT, expertise, authoritativeness, and trust. We want to be able to do that, but you're not going to be an expert if your content is not relevant to the query. So let's start with the query. They're asking a question. You have content. It is relevant to that particular question. It directly addresses it, and you're able to become an expert. This is really a requirement in order for you to rank, because there's a lot of sites out there for every keyword. For any query, you now get 1 million results. So there's going to be a lot of competition in here. It has to be the kind of thing, as I mentioned, shareable, likable, linkable. It has to have all those characteristics. If it isn't worth talking about, it's average. An average does not put you at the top of 1 million results. You actually have to be there. Is it great relative to whether it is on or off target? Would it exist if it wasn't for SEO? That's a good question as well. So we have to be able to do that. And somehow when you get your content and you've written your content and you put it up on your website, it is going to matter that people like it. You have to like it. You have to be proud of it. And there's a lot of things that we're going to cover in this section about how to get there. To move forward, I want to comment on duplicate content. In theory, there is no such thing as duplicate content. There's no duplicate content penalty. It may feel like there is, but there isn't. What actually happens is duplicate content does a couple of things. One, Google's not going to give the same content to the query 500 times. If you do a query, they want to give unique content. So the same content over and over and over again typically is not going to show up in a Google search result. So duplicate content experiences filtering when it's time to put it into a Google search result. The second part of the problem is the duplicate content, Google doesn't know who owns it. And it may be that a competitor site or somebody in syndication actually ranks for your content and you don't. So you have to be careful of that. The third part is the way links are distributed. Somebody may link to version A, somebody links to the copy of version A. The link juice is distributed. That's one of the reasons for a canonical tag. And we have to pay attention to the fact that we have duplicate content. Now we also have the issue of what does it do for the quality of your website? If I have a lot of the content repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated, the overall quality of your website drops. Now this is commonly a problem when you're running an e-commerce site with faceted search. I want the blue ones. I want the red ones. Exactly the same kind of content, just one word changed. That over time actually diminishes your ability to rank for either blue or red. So you're going to have to make sure that the quality of your website is not diminished by the fact that you have so much content that is replicated on so many pages. But there is no penalty for duplicate content. The Google Quality Guidelines are rather specific. It is a quality concern. It is actually going to impact whether or not you are worthy of ranking. So pay attention to it. As you know, I've recommended that everybody that's an SEO download and read the Google Quality Rating Guidelines. I encourage you to do that if you haven't. That's where EAT has been expressed, and that is where a lot of these quotes are going to come from. In this section, we're going to be discussing the page experience update. That update has really two parts. The first part is called Core Web Vitals, and it contains some very technical material that you need to do to improve the overall quality and experience that a user would have with your website. The second part is previously existing things that are now emphasized a little bit more. Essentially, Google is turning up the dial on the importance of these things. Now, as we get into this, our experience has been this is a month to 2 months of work to really get it right. There have been plenty of experiences out on the web where people have worked very hard to get up to a very high 90, 100 score, and then 2 months later it's back down to 50 or 60. It just sort of evolves to where your scores are hard to hold. Then you can re-enhance your site and you can get your scores back up. But it basically says that this is a constant process. This is not a do it once and you're done experience. So let's assume that it's going to take time. It's certainly going to take effort. These are the things we need to work on. Thank you for watching this overview. It should serve to give you a really good overview of the SEO pieces and complexities and parts. It is just an introduction to a 15-hour SEO training course that's part of our membership area at SEOtraining.com. I encourage you to go there. If you should have any questions related to this, yes, we provide services and a lot of answers. So if you are interested, please reach out to us. You can reach us through our website, either at SEOtraining.com or at bruceclay.com. Look forward to hearing from you.